There's got to be a technical term for that.
The keyboard foot.
Yeah,
The foot.
Oh, that's 2 feet. Okay.
Yeah.
You.
Keyboards have 2 feet. So, you intellectuals, let's get that application open from last time. We were working with our CD audio. So our menu one that we did at the end of class, it was okay. It was that CD audio one that we were working on before that had that bug. It was crashing when we tried to update. So I told you to spend an hour or so debugging. I'm getting the impression that you didn't do that. Yeah. He was working on stuff, though. That's all that matters. Getting it all done. So let's take some time and try to figure it out. It's a pretty hard one. So that's why I was saying you only want to spend 30 minutes or an hour looking at it, because it could be a very hard one to figure out. But we want to look at it together, because if you run into a problem like this on your own, I don't want you to be spending 4 to 6 hours trying to figure it out, or giving up and deciding that you should be a ditch digger instead. We like ditch diggers, but they have a harder life. So who is helping? Huh?
They make good money, though.
Yeah,
they make a good $20 an hour.
Until their back goes out. But we have that same problem, I think, with our backs too much sitting around. So let's see who could share.
I wasn't here, so
Shared
I'm not entirely
yesterday.
sure what you did for it.
No, we're not going to have you share because you weren't here.
Technically, his is still broken from what we wanted.
You want to start there
I had a
and
comment
get back to where we
I
were?
didn't
Is that what
do-
you're saying? You would like to waste another hour getting there?
No one's always asked.
Where was that error coming from? I can't see the time.
Would you like to share? Would you mind? Let's do it.
I'll tell you, I kind of
Do it, and we'll see if we can find our error. Because we do want to make sure we can find it. It's been a while. You guys had lots of stuff to work on. Get it open and see. What we were getting on this one, if you guys remember, great. If you don't, I'll just kind of refresh your memory a little bit. We were getting a null reference exception, which means we were trying to use an instance of a class, but C# was like, you haven't created an instance to be using. So these can be really, really hard problems to fix. So this is a great opportunity for us to do some debugging here, because the problem that we're running into is actually a little bit interesting. Are you finding it?
No, I can't do it. That's how good I am at this.
Oh, come on. We'll wait. You don't want to lose ya.
Yeah, I couldn't get it.
Let you get to the Zoom. Whoa, look at it go. Okay, so Andrew's going to try to run it, and let's make sure that it really crashes.
No, it's not crashing.
It's not crashing. Yours is fixed.
Yeah.
Oh, this isn't the right one. Let's do a file, open project. We have so many versions of this audio CD one. So we want the chapter 10 audio CD. We just have so many.
Yeah.
So many. Well, let me just do some troubleshooting with everybody together, and we'll figure it out, because we do have so many. Thank you for trying. Let's release your share. Caleb, do you have it back there? Could you share yours?
Me? There?
Uh-huh.
Mine was a little bit more broken than everybody else.
Was it broken? Okay, I'm just going to share mine then. That's all right. Now, the one that we fixed today, I'll be sure and post.
Because remember, I couldn't get mine to.
Oh, that's right. We had that weird problem and we didn't figure it out.
Just the last one.
Okay. I'm going to try to get that figured out today. Okay, so I'm going to run it and let's see if it's having the problem. And when we run our app, it starts up with our default. Everything looks great. I can click reset and add a new one. I'll add the Beatles. I just like it better if you guys aren't just watching me because I know that can be so boring. All right, now I've got that one. I'm going to click on the default and try to update it. And when we tried to update, it's when we ran into our error. And our error says, so if yours isn't working, just pay attention to the debugging so that you can reproduce this if you need to. We have a no reference exception. We have this object, instant CD, but C# is saying it was null. We hadn't actually created an instance of this object. Well, if I'm looking at our code here, I'm going to stop running. The cancel is happening in our load form data method, and in our load form data method, we're taking that CD's data and putting it in our text box. We copy or we run that load form data from a couple of places, from our form load and from our list box selected index changed. My guess is going to be that that is the problem area because we got past our form load, right? We didn't have a crash there. So I'm going to set up a breakpoint to stop within this selected index changed event procedure so we can see what's going on. I'm going to run my application, set up my new one. And I'm going to click on my default. Now, my breakpoint took over, and I'm in my selected index changed event procedure. That makes sense because I just clicked on that item, so I should be in this event procedure. I'm going to step into my code, press F11. It creates or updates our selected index variable, creates an instance of the audio CD based on the selected item that we clicked on, calls our load form data, which updates all of our text boxes. Everything's running fine. It's going and running those event procedures we have set up to validate our input data on our text boxes. So it does a little bit of jumping around. But it all seems to work. Another text changed. And finally, I'm done with my load form data method. We update our status text and display, and everything's fine. So that was me clicking on the item. Now if I update it, update, I'm going to click OK. I'm still in the debug mode, so I'm going to continue stepping into my code. Notice that I'm in the OK button click this time, because that's what I clicked. Our selected index is not -1 because we had an item that we were looking at. We created an instance of the CD class using that item. Run our load data, load class. Update our class properties from our text boxes. We're going to update the list box to show that our new CD items are there. Now, when we update the list box, it goes to our class and it runs the toString method. And then it starts running the selected index changed. Nobody clicked on that. We didn't say that we wanted to run the selected index changed method, but because we updated what was in the list box, this method is getting run. It's running fine. Oh, nope, there it canceled. Now, I'm going to click stop. And I'm going to stop my debugging. I ran it a lot of times in the debugger, and you might run yours a lot of times in the debugger to see what's happening. What I found was every time we did an update to our list box, anything in that list box, it ran the selected index changed method once for every time we had something in our list box. A kind of an unusual behavior that we weren't expecting. So our code is good, it's just that the list box is causing it to be executed repeatedly, which we weren't expecting. So we actually have a really easy fix. We can say if the list box selected index is not equal to -1, we want to do all this stuff. So if we have an item selected in our list, then we want to do all of this updating of things. But if we don't, if the selected index is -1, like it is as it processes all of the other items in the list, we want to just ignore those items. Now, see if that takes care of your problem. But what I want you to really notice is how hard that could be to decipher, how hard that could be to figure out. It can actually be kind of hard to create an incident like that for you guys to do troubleshooting on. So it worked out really well for us that we were able to create it. Now when I update, I should just see my update, and instead of it crashing, should have everything the way I want. So sometimes when you're debugging, you might have to step through your code more than once to really figure out what's happening here. Like I said, every time I stepped through it, I was like, what are we doing? We're doing the right thing. Why is this thing going crazy? And then I finally realized that this method was being executed multiple times for all of those different things. So we got it. All right, let's save that one. This one, like I said, will be pretty important in working on your final. So gonna wanna have it. Now we need to talk about working with files, sequential files today. So that's what we're gonna get started on now.
Can you send that file?
I'll post it later.
Thank you. Just 'cause I was just trying.
Yeah.
She will make you make a program to access it.
Yes, that's a good idea. You can write a program with a list box to get to it.
It's not really, that gets harder blank on there.
What?
That's just suddenly gets harder blank on.
I like Dominic's ideas. Sequential data files. Let's do it. This is our last topic. You guys have learned everything. And you'll have a chance to practice everything. Don't worry. All of the different classes that you take, you get more opportunities to practice, which is really good.
Having played with it already, this is one of the big tipping points where some of your programs become way more useful. So,
Exactly. It is. It's super important. It is that second heading there that Dominic's talking about that makes it really matter. Persistent data. So far, we've just been writing crapola programs, right? We type some stuff in, we do some processing, it all goes away when we close the program. Nothing saved, nothing gained, right? Because we just ran it and we're done. Now we're finally talking about persistent data, saving our data. That's what's important, right? When we're computer people or software developers, we need to save that data. We can't just let it go away and make people recreate it every time they run our application. So when you're working with files, this picture is a file picture in a flow chart or anything that you're working with. So that cylinder is used to indicate a disk. And we use files like that all the time. We're gonna be looking at databases in C#2 and other classes. You guys get a lot of opportunity to look at those. And of course, those are kind of our preferred method of storing data. But a lot of times a simple sequential text file will do the job, and it's just what we need. So we can save data to files, read data from files. You guys use save files for your games. You know how important that is, right? If you can't save it, it can't be persistent that way. Now, when we're accessing files with C#, we're going to be using the system.io namespace. So we'll need a using statement for that. We've seen in our programs, as we've created applications, that program files can be different than data files, right? A program file might not be readable. If we have C# source code, we can read it, but if that source code has been compiled into that intermediate language, that's not readable by us anyways. It's something that we can't really look at. But they're all still files, right? A file is kind of a file is a file. And I really like to emphasize that to people. If you have a Photoshop file, that is no different than a Word file, than a text file, than an Excel file, than any other type of file. You can read all of those from C#. The difference is what's saved in the files. So Photoshop uses certain control codes, kind of like our \n is a control code to go to a new line. In Photoshop, they've created their own control codes that they embed within a bunch of different characters to make something into an image, right? In Word, we have control codes embedded that cause font changes or paragraph changes or things like that. So those control codes are meaningless if we open that file in a different program. But if we use the right application to open the file, then that file looks like it's different than any other file, but it's not. It's all just the code that's making it appear that way. Now, if we're working with a data file, kind of what we start with in programming, we're going to be thinking of a set of repeating data kind of like this. Here we have a file of student names and some scores. So if we look at this file, each of the rows in the file are a record. Will that be on the test? Yes. Each row is a record. Now, when you're looking at all of these records in this file, we kind of want to look at them a record at a time. When I'm looking at a record, like record 1, each of the columns is considered a field. So my file is broken up into records. Each record is broken up into individual fields so that I can process that information. Whenever we're looking at data files, it's important to kind of remember some history things because it can help you with understanding why things are done the way they are. In the early days, there were only sequential files. A VHS is an example of a sequential file. If you're working with a VHS tape, can you point your remote and go directly to a spot? Or do you have to fast forward? Right? You have to fast forward, rewind. So we have to get sequentially positioned on that tape at the right spot, and then we can start reading that tape to watch that video or whatever is on there. So a VHS tape is a sequential file format, right? We have to process things in order. Now, if we look at a DVD, CD, hard drive, solid state drive, any sort of magnetic or mechanical media like that, it's direct access. I can go directly to a given spot on my CD and find the information that I need. So think about that. It's a really important point. It's kind of the difference between processing with a stream reader and with a binary file object when we're working with C#. Because file processing was started with those sequential type devices, we think of file processing as a looping structure. So what we're going to do is open a file, read a record from the file. If it's not the end of the file, we'll process that record and read another one. If it's not the end of the file, we'll process that record and read another one. When we finally get to the end of the file, we'll close the file. So each of those steps are super important. We have to make sure that we get everything done properly.
What is processing the record specifically?
It depends on what you want to do with that data. So just like we would process our user's input if they put it on the form, we're going to process that file input in some way. So
Why is it not, if it's the end of the file, is that saying you read and processed the last record and then you see the end, or you're like not processing?
you won't know it's the end. It's a really good question. You won't know it's the end until you try to read. and your read will respond with information that it's now being in the file. And so then you'll branch off and not process it. But yeah, you kind of have to be aware of what's going on and making sure that you're not at the end of your file. So here's our file. We're going to read a record and process it. And with this file here, we're just going to keep reading those records until we finally get to the end of the file, and then we'll know that we're done. We're done with everything that was in that file. Now, talking about files and folders and directories and all those great things brings up our project folder. You guys are all on top of this, right, in Visual Studio? We have our project folder, and inside that we've seen that we have other folders and things that are important. Let's open Visual Studio. I still have that CD thing open. And I want you to look at the folder that houses this project. I'm actually going to right-click on my solution and open folder in File Explorer. That'll work. Now, when we look at our folder for our solution, we're going to see a project folder for every project in our solution. Inside our project folder, we have the bin, object, and properties folder, and we might have some others depending on what we have. Now, I want you to open your bind folder, or bin. It's really bind, short for binaries or executables. Now, once you're inside your binaries folder, we want to go into the debug folder. And inside your debug folder, if you have your view settings set properly, where you're showing your file name extensions and all of that, you should see the executable for your project. So if I want to run my program without using Visual Studio, I can just run that executable. And find it. Now, our executable is in our debug folder, because right now we haven't told Visual Studio that we want to set this project up as a release. If we did that, then we would find it in the release folder. But we'll just stick with our debug folder for here while we're learning. Now, this debug folder is considered our execution folder, right? It has our executable in it and all of our executable files. So as we're working with sequential files, we need to be aware of that, because this folder is the default place for those files to go. So that's where the system's going to put them. You guys know how to do all of that stuff. Ugly pictures. Okay, so let's create a project. In this morning's class, we created a console project, but let's create a forms-based project. So I might mess it up, but I'd like this to be chapter 13. And chapter 13 is the chapter that we're on looking at that PDF document. Let's make this be chapter 13 directory structure. And then I'm going to put 102 on it. And what I want to do in this application is we're going to use some of the C# classes that are available that let us look at the files and folders in our file system. What do we have out there? Now, to create this one, let's add a text box to our form. I'm not going to worry about making this one pretty or anything, because we just want to do it quickly. Now, this text box, I do want it to be multi-line. And I want a button. I'll make my button say okay. I'll leave everything else but I just can't leave that button, same button. Drive me crazy. Okay, so let's double click our OK button, and we're going to access the Windows file system. So we need to change our using statements and add using system.io. I'm going to keep the using windows.forms and system. The first class that I'd like to use is the directory info. Let's bring up a tab and search for directory info class in C#. Oh, and look at the Microsoft documentation for it. Now, the directory info class is one that I know we're going to use it, but if I wasn't sure about what its capabilities were and what kind of methods it had, I could come up with this information from the Microsoft site, and then I could see, like over here on the side, they have, what are the properties that are available for the directory info? Now, first of all, a directory is a folder, right there, synonymous. That's just the same exact word. So this is going to give me information about folders in my file system. So what kind of properties does it have? Oh, it has a whole bunch. So if I was needing to know how big a file was or a folder, I would be able to look through all the properties and see if I could find that information. Now, also, if I want to know what kind of methods I have available, I could look through and see what else I could find. We're going to create an instance of the directory info class using our current directory. So let's do that in our button one click. I want to use directory info, and I want to name my instance of my class dir. Now, I want to do it on the current folder. The current folder is always a dot. So the dot character implies the current folder or the current directory. Now that I've created a directory info object, I can use it to find out things about the current directory. Let's add something to our text box. Textbox1.text. I'm going to set it equal to first the current directory. And then I want to add the current directory to that. Now, I'm going to actually use the directory class here to do that, and we'll talk about why in just a second. But I want to get the current directory. So run that and see if you're getting anything in your text box. Okay, fix my semicolon here. So it's saying that my current directory is on the C drive. It's in my users folder, in the Riley RE folder, in the source folder, in the repos folder, and it's going on down. So do you see all that information coming up for yours? So that's my project folder, right? I'm looking at my project folder here. Okay, if you're getting stuff there, that's great. Let's add a little bit more. Now, for this that we have so far, we have created a directory info object. On our current folder. And then we're going to use the directory class to display the folder's name. So we had to use both of those different classes, or we were able to get that information. So now that we know that these two classes are available to us, we could figure out a lot. Okay, now let's list all of the files in that folder, in that directory. Now, if I look at the directory info class, do you see anything that looks like it'll give us all of the files that are in the directory? There's this get files. There's actually a lot of different options, right? So we could try some different ones if we were experimenting on our own. We don't have to do as much experimentation, but sometimes you have to when you're on your own. Okay, so before we list all of the files in our folder, let's make our text box go down a couple of lines. Plus equal \r \n \r \n. That should go down a couple of lines. And then we want to add a heading. So this heading is going to say some things like file name. And then they want it padded for 52 characters because we want some columns here. Now remember last time I said, oh, we could make this list box look nicer, and then I just went ahead on and didn't. Now you'll see how we could make it look nicer. So we can do a pad right here to extend out this heading and make it match up with our data. We're going to add a little bit more. We also want to add the word size, and we want to pad it to the right with 10 characters. And then finally, we'll add the words creation time. Let's run and make sure that looks okay. So yeah, we're getting some nice spread out headings there. That looks pretty good. I'll go ahead and add plus equal another \r \n. And now we're ready to loop through all of the files within this folder. So we can do that using a for each loop. So we're going to say for each file info object, because when we have information about a file, it's going to be saved for us in a file info object. For each file info object, we want to call it file, and we want this file info to come from our directory object, and we want to get all of its files. Now, when I look at this dir.getFiles, I'm going to type this opening parenthesis myself. IntelliSense gives me a little bit of help there, and it says, you know, what you have within this parameter is going to be a search pattern. You need to give the get files a search pattern. Well, I want it to get me all of the files, so I'm going to use star.star, because that's our famous wildcard search pattern that gets all files. Matches everything. So now my for each is going to give me a list of every file that's in that folder. For every file that's in that folder, we're going to set it up as a row in our display. We're going to set up a name variable, and we're going to grab the file's name. Oops, I'm missing curly braces for my for each. We're going to create a long variable named size, and we'll use that to hold the length of each file. We're going to create a date time object. called creation time. And we'll use it to hold our files creation time. And we want to output this now. We're going to have to do that string.format. So I want to update my text box, text property, and I want to add to it this string.format info. Remember, we use the string.format if we want to use some of those console codes without using the console. So we're going to say parameter 0 is going to be placed. Parameter 1 is going to be 12 characters long and numeric with 0 decimal places. Let me get this typed in and then we can look at it. Parameter 2 will be 20 characters and it's going to be a general short date. Okay, let's take a look at that. So for the first part of your string.format, we want all of this enclosed within our double quotes. We have parameter 0. We're going to use that to hold the name. Then we want the next thing, parameter 1 is going to be the size. And the number 12 in our parameter specification is saying it should be 12 columns wide. We want it to be a number with 0 decimal places. Finally, our last parameter should be 20 characters wide, and we want it to be a general date. That's what that G is. Now, for our replacement parameters, we want name, and with the name, we're going to add the pad right for 45. It's nice when we don't have to figure it all out. They've done it for us. So our replacement variables are name, size, and creation time. After we put that in our text box, let's go forward a line. \r\n. And then we should continue with our ForEach loop and format the next file that's in our directory and output it. Yes, sir?
What is the \r do again?
Carriage return. Typewriter.
Okay.
Okay, try it. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad. In my folder, I have just a few files. Even with all their beautiful thinking ahead, it's still not exactly perfect, is it? Can be a little bit better. But I'd like to try a different folder. So I think I want to go up to the top, and right here where we have the dot within the double quotes that's saying we want to use our current directory, I think that I would rather make that be my H drive. So I'm going to change that to be H:\\, and because it's got a \, I'll put 2 so that I can escape that. Now, if you're listing your H drive, depending on what you have in your H drive, you might have more, you might have less. Let's try it. At least it should be different. I have a bunch in my H drive. I needed a scroll bar and it didn't give me one. Now, when I look at this H drive listing, notice we're listing the files, not the folders. So I have a bunch of folders in my H drive that aren't shown here because this dir files only lists all the files. But I would be able to find another method to list all those folders if I wanted to. Okay, is everybody's working? Now this example is just for you, just for your benefit, because sometimes as a developer, you need to know these kinds of things. Maybe you need to know if a folder exists, or if a file exists within a folder, and you want to create it if it doesn't, or you want to give your user some sort of error message if it doesn't. So it's an important thing for you to know how to be able to do. Is it all working? Got it? It's okay? Okay.
I assume that's
The size should just be bytes. Bytes, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm sure you could change it and get another property that would be different. Yeah, it's small. Yeah, so now if you know, if you've got, someone in the family that saves those huge giant files, you can run through and find them. You could do it other ways, but it's fun to do it in a program. Another application or program that's really useful that a lot of people like is you could write a program that drills down into each of your folders and displays the total size of that folder, since that's information that can be hard to get from Windows. So I know I have some freeware utilities that do that. And like with mine on my laptop, my C drive started running out of space, and I'm really careful about it. I don't put much out there. And I did have to download a utility to find it, and it was because I had installed Android Studio, and it had put a lot of stuff in my user data folder and filled it all up. So.
I use one called WinDirStat that gives you a graphical.
Ooh, there's some nice ones.
Just look, it's like, oh, there it is.
I see where all the space is gone.
Right.
But these are handy ones to use, and a lot of developers will write. Gosh, I know some people will write, they'll get like a special method that they create that they put in every program they ever write, that like just create some file, and then they know if that file exists, their program has been run. Just weird things like that that don't even matter, but people like doing kind of things like that to get that footprint. We can do it. Okay, so let's read a file then into a forms-based program. Here's one. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Our first program that's going to read a file. Yes, sir?
I think that I had some sort of security thing or something on ours, because it won't show every single file that we wanted to show. It only show specific things.
Well, it won't show any folders.
It won't hardly show any files either.
Huh.
It showed me thumbs.db and that was it.
On your H drive?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. We'll have to let you see if you have everything in folders. Maybe you're super organized. You don't have any files in you. Are you just super organized? Because, yeah, I was surprised you guys were able to run it on your H drive at all. I'm thinking not last year that they weren't even able to run it. That it was just like, no.
Oh, and desktop.ini.
So you got that. He's always showing you some things.
Give me two things.
Okay, here's the one we're going to write. We're going to have this little text box, and we're going to let people type in their favorite saying. And if they click the button, we're going to save their saying in a text file so that we can just create a really simple text file and see how it works. So let's create a new project, actually a new solution. I want to save this one and close it, and you guys can just use it as an example. Now our new project is going to be chapter 13. Whoops. There I am. Chapter 13, Sayings App 102. Now for our app, let's create our form. We don't need anything super fancy. We just created our new app. So we named it Chapter 13 Sayings App. Okay, so for our form, let's make our heading say Favorite Sayings Storing App. That's some like proper English, right? And I want to set a back color. Orange isn't too bad. I'll wake you up. Our for color. And I want to up my font a little bit because it's too small. Last time I mentioned fonts, but I don't know if we really went as far as I wanted to with our font. When I look at the font that I'm using right now, the default font is Microsoft Sans Serif. What is a serif font? Serif. And so what is sans serif? Not having those, right? And so why would it be important to us when we're creating a forms application to be using a font that doesn't have all of those little curly cues and things? There's a couple of reasons.
For resolution modders, they can either display or not display.
It can look kind of fuzzy, furry, that's true. What else? Whenever I'm using a serif font, are all my letters the same width?
No.
No. So if I have something that's sans serif, I have a chance of making a column display, right? Because they are all the same width. But if I go serif, make me not say it backwards. If I use the one that has all the little curly cues and is super fancy, each letter is a different size. So it makes it really hard to make things line up on your form. So that can be a problem too. So there's a couple of reasons we want to be sans serif, not having curly cues. Now, if we put that stuff on there, that's fine, but we need to be aware that it could cause some problems with those kinds of things. Now, I've got my form here ready, and I want to, down at the bottom, put a label, first thing. And last time we used a text box. Today we're going to use a label so that you can kind of consider what the differences are. We're going to name this label LBL message. Now I don't want it to say label 1 when the form displays. So I'm going to change the text property to say something nice like welcome to Sayings app. And you can make it say something a little bit more correct if you like. Now I don't need a lot of space on this, so I'm going to make it a little smaller. And I'd like to have a label at the top that'll be like our heading. So I'm going to find my label control. Up here at the top of the form, I want it to say, enter favorite saying. I want this to be a heading, so I'd like it to stand out. I'm going to make its font bigger. And I think I'll make it bold. Now, under this label, we're going to put our text box where the user is actually going to type in their saying. So, text box. Now, I want this to be multi-line. And I'll make it kind of big like our example. And I need to name it. So let's name this TXT BX saying. And then the last thing we need is a button to be a nice simple form for us. That last one was getting a little crazy. I'm going to find a button. And I want this to be named BTN saying. Let's make it BTN store, sorry. Because it's going to stay as a text property, store saying. I'll fix my back color. Beautiful. Now, the way we're going to make this application work is in the form load, we're going to open the file, make sure we can access the file that we're going to use, things like that. Then, while the form is being displayed, that file will be open. The user can type things. When they click the button to say store saying, we're going to take all of the things that are in the text box and write them to the file. When the application closes, we're going to close the file. So let's start with our form load that opens the file. So double click on a blank spot on your form, and we'll create that. Now again, we don't need all of these using statements. I'm going to get rid of all. I want system.io, system, and Windows Forms. Now, we want to create a class level variable, an instance variable, to hold our file stream object. So it's going to be private, and it's going to be a stream writer. We'll talk a little bit more about these next time, but a stream writer object is basically something that can take a stream of consciousness, a stream of characters, and write them to a file. We're going to name this object FIL, short for file. So let's use that in our form load then. Whenever we're working with file objects, we want to have everything enclosed within try-catch logic, because when we're working with the file system, we're prone to have errors. We're going to try to allocate a file as a new stream writer, and let me get this organized here. Within the stream writer's parameter is where we specify the file name. So we're going to use the @ sign, which indicates a verbatim string. So kind of like the $sign indicated that string where we could change all of the variable names. The @ sign indicates a string that should not be changed. So let's say our file is on the C drive in a folder named Bob, and our file is saying.txt. Now we put that access within a try, so let's add our catch logic if there's a problem with that file. So we can catch multiple types of errors. We would like to catch a directory not found exception. Is a separate kind of exception. And if we catch that, we're going to name the exception object exe, and we're going to update our label. And we're going to make our label say invalid directory. And then we're going to add the exception message to that. Now for this example, we'd like to catch another type of error also. So we might get some other error, any other kind of system IO exception. And if we do, we'd like to catch it also. We'll update our message. and set it to that message that we receive. Okay, so that's our form load. So if yours is working, let's try it. I mean, if you're ready to try it, try it. Don't know if it's working. Okay, here's my bright orange form, and down at the bottom it says, invalid directory. Could not find a part of the path C:\Bob\saying.txt. Well, that's correct. I don't have a Bob folder on my C drive, so it was right that it couldn't find it. So let's change that path, and I want it now to just be saying.txt. Instead of that absolute path that was pointing to the C drive, I want to use a relative path that says, based on our current folder, name it saying.txt. I'd like to see if that works. So I'm going to update my label message. Say file opened, I guess. Might take that back out because that's going to update our thank you, but that's all right. I just want to see it. All right, so now we should be able to run. And since we're doing something with our relative path, it should all work. But I didn't have a saying.txt file in my project. Did you? Did it create one? Let's check. Look at your Solution Explorer. And on the top of your Solution Explorer, see the toolbars? We haven't used those very much. Find this tool that says Solution and Folders. When you click on it, it's going to switch the view from the solution to the files and folders in your project. Now that it's looking at files and folders, we could do this in File Explorer too, but I can expand my bin folder, my debug folder, and I see now I do have that saying.txt file. So it created it for us. We said it's a new file in this current directory. Well, it did find the current directory. It couldn't find the Bob directory, but it did find this directory, so it created it. Okay, does everybody see that file in your bin debug folder? Make sure you know where that is. You can go find it because that's your relative path. Okay, so we got our file opened. Let's update our OK button code or store button code to save the saying that they type in. So for our store button, we want to update our file. And with our file, we can do a write line command just like we could with the console. What do we want to write? Well, we want to write everything that's in our text box sayings.txt property. We'll go ahead and clear out that text box and then set our focus to that text box. Now for our catch, we're just going to catch any IO exception, system.io.io exception. And if we do get any sort of error, we just want to update our label to display it. Go ahead and try it. Now I can't run because I'm looking at this file view. So I do have to switch back to my Solution Explorer view. And then I've got my start button. I'll type something in here. The early bird gets a worm.
Oh no, bird was fine.
Work was about right, wasn't it? Now it disappeared and everything is sort of good. I'm going to close my application and look at my file.
Should you maybe have a thing that tells it to close the file when you press X or whatever?
Yeah,
Or
so
just
I
in
want you to
general?
notice that our file is empty because we didn't close it properly. So we could do all sorts of work with it, and if we don't close it properly, we're losing all that work.
Because
So
you
the
haven't
file
saved it
close is
effectively.
so important, exactly. So if we don't close the file, we lose the work. So let's put that in. Go back to your form, and we want to be looking at your form properties. And let's go to the form events. And we want to associate an event with our form closing. So if you remember, we just double-clicked on that form closing for it to create that event. Now,
How did you do that? Sorry.
oh, we went to our form properties and then clicked on that events lightning bolt and did our form closing. Okay, so for our form closing, we're going to say file object. We want to close you. And if we get an error, we want to catch it. And we want to catch any system.io.io exception and update our label. I didn't name that exception. There it is. And that should do it. Now try it again. And when you close out of the application, it should save your file and you should see the sayings that you type. The early bird gets a worm. I'm going to store it. Now when we close,
Seems like it worked this time.
did it work for you?
My question is if we return these things for erase the previous data.
It will. Try it, because that's a really good question.
I'm sure she has a plan to get to that bit. Yeah.
Right. So we could. So if we run, and now I have a saying saved in my file, but I type in a new one, I can only think of one, and close, you should see that it wiped out that old one. So it would be nice if we could append to our file. And appending means we have stuff that's there, we just add more to it. So that's really easy to do. Find the spot in your form load where we allocate our new stream writer. And right after that file name, if you put a comma, IntelliSense will tell you you can add a Boolean as to whether or not we should append. It says if it's basically true to append data to the file, false to overwrite. So I'm going to put true. And now if we run, we should add to the file instead of overwriting it. Now I've got 2. Is it working? Working for you. So it's pretty easy to handle. We don't have much trouble. Now, would be kind of nice if we could see what was already in our file, couldn't it? Wouldn't it? Instead of, what if I type the same saying again and I get it in there a bunch of times? Let's read our file and display it when our form opens, and then we can just keep adding to it. So we're going to do that within our form load, and we're going to kind of add it. The way our application works right now, let's say that we're going to add a new method called load file.
Sorry to stop you, but I couldn't get back out of the file.
Oh, go up here and in your Solution Explorer, click back on that icon to go back to your solution.
When you, so like the one stating that view, when you close your program, or your, hey, do you want to like refresh the page and plug in, and just say yes, or yes, all, whenever it should update. Whenever I press that file, it shoots me back, and there's only one thing there. Like to run it? It should just the solution chapter 13 saying 0 projects.
Can you show us? Share it, share it. Because it did like that to somebody else in the morning class. So I want you to share with everybody if you don't mind. Yes, sir, do you know what to do? Oh, sorry. Here in a minute I will. Oh, so right click on it. Right click on it. Go down one on your project where it says unavailable. Will it let you reload it? Reload it. I don't know why it did that. See if it's okay then. Is it really okay?
Yeah, it looks good now.
So be careful with that file view because apparently you can do things. It's not something I've used a lot. Okay, which one did you do? Do you see it? The last one, our closing.
The form closing, which one did you click on in the?
We went to the form and then our events, and then we double clicked the form closing event. And then this is our code that we need. We're just going to do the close on our file within our try-catch. I thought you guys were going awful fast. Getting everything done. Which one? Right there. Don't worry, everybody would rather wait for you and check their phone. So we don't mind. Phone tech. If you guys ever see me do that, you know I'm really disgusted. I've had some classes before where I've done that. I just sit up here on my phone too. It's like, fine. Let's just have some phone time. If that's what we're gonna do, then that's what we'll do. Okay, guys, got it? Let's make it read the file. So in our form load, I'm gonna just pop in this load file method. Let's create that. This is the way we should be doing it anyways. We're putting a lot of code in our event procedures. We saw that when we created those methods to update our text boxes and our class properties within our last application, it really helped us by using those methods. So we want to remember that. Okay, so I want to create private void load file. In our load file, we're going to need a stream reader object. So let's allocate that, stream reader. We don't need to access it in any other methods, so we don't need it to be global. But it's going to be a new stream reader object, and we really do want to access that same sayings text file. So I'm going to name this stream reader file in and say it's a new stream reader.
Do you have the app side?
Yes. And it doesn't matter at this point, but it would if we started putting in a full path. So better for us to just do it in the first place. I've got a project here somewhere that I'm trying to find. Hang on. I think I have it 17 times. Let me get some closed so I can find it. All right, I think that'll work. Now I've got my stream reader here that we're allocating. Whenever we allocate a stream reader or writer like this, should it be within a try-catch? Yes, because the other one was kind of different because since it was a global or class level, it wasn't really as obvious to notice that when we were instantiating that instance, we had that within a try-catch. Okay, so I'm going to make sure that my allocation is within a try. I also need to allocate a string variable to hold each record that we read from our file. So I'll name that record. Now we're going to go into a while loop. Now that our file is open, we would like to read that file. I'm still having a hard time finding my example, so sorry. There it is. While, and I'm going to do 2 sets of parentheses, record equals our file in dot read line. Okay, so let's take a look at this all together. The innermost part of this is we want to read a line from our file into a record string. If that we read in is not null, we got something. We're not at the end of the file. Okay, so we can do that while all within one line of code. We could do a bunch of different lines of code if we wanted to, but we can take care of it within that one and make our lives a lot easier. So now that line of code has read a data item from our file into our string variable record, and it's ready for us to use. So our text box, txt box saying dot text, we can update with the contents of that record, and then let's put in \r\n to go to a new line after each one of those. Did I back? Oh, I forward slashed. There we go. Now, as soon as we're done with that while loop, we can just close that file. And we're all done with it. So we've done all of our opening, processing, and closing all together. And then we're going to catch any sort of error that we might encounter as an exception object. And we'll record that message in our label if we need to. So try running it. You should see the contents of your file hopefully displayed in your text box. Up here, I have saying.txt, and down here, sayings. It matters. Make sure they're the same. We should set up a variable to hold that file name, right? And now I'm seeing my data. Now, if I add some more, and store, I have to actually close my application and run it again. Yeah, we could have a button to read it. So now I'm seeing it doubled up. Why is that? Because we appended. So now that we have it set this way, we don't want to append anymore. So get rid of that true. And now it should just work the way you want, where it'll just write exactly what's in the text box out to the file. And sorry, you guys can change it up however you like. And the assignment that you have is somewhat like this, where you've got to read in a file and then save it. And you do have some leeway in that one as to how it works. So you might want yours to work a little bit different than the next person does. That's fine. So it's up to you as to how it works. So. Okay, is everybody's working okay?
No,
What's the matter?
I'm not sure. It doesn't spit out any errors, but it doesn't save the text properly. Yeah, I have the file closed and everything.
Put a breakpoint in your file form closing, and then run it, and make sure when you close it really does run your close code, because it might not have gotten associated with your form properly. Okay, while he's doing that, let's document this. I'm going to go up to the very top, view my class. So we're going to say this is the sayings. Alex, document with us, and then we'll figure out what's going on with it. We get it all closed so we can look at it. Now our purpose here is to read and update a file. We have our variable, our instance variable documented. I'm going to document the no-R constructor for our form. For our form load, we'll say this event procedure prepares the form to display. And of course, when you look at that form 1 load, notice how much better it would be if we had our, prepping for our write file in a separate method also. It would be much more logical. But our load file method, this method will read an existing sayings file. Our store button, this event procedure We'll update the sayings file. And then lastly, our form closing. This event procedure will close the file. Now, every semester when we do this file stuff, it's the part of the semester where people start getting kind of quiet, ready to be done, all that kind of stuff. But it's important. So if you're having a hard time understanding, please get with me, get with some other people, make sure that you have a pretty good understanding of what we're doing and what's going on, so that as you're moving forward, it won't be a weak area for you. And then we're gonna try. Did you find it, Alex? No? You wanna share? You wanna share with us?
Sure.
Let me stop here and you can. Okay, go for it. So it's just not saving it.
Well, no, it's saving it because when I open the stuff that I had previously entered, it's in there.
Okay.
But like, whenever I run it again or like put in new text, it doesn't load the text that was currently in there, and it doesn't put the text into the writer. And then whenever I add new text, it continues to erase the previous content. So I'll put like.
You're sure we can't see it because you're sharing.
Okay. Hang on. I'll take this out.
Yeah, they share the whole screen.
Yeah, you're sharing that.
So like, I'll put that, or I'll store it,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I go to open the file, it's closed.
Gotta close it.
Yeah. Okay, it wasn't working a minute ago.
If your app is open, your file isn't closed.
Yeah, but I was opening it. Yeah, see, it's not.
Huh.
And then if I type in something new, close it, it replaces it.
Oh, yeah, because you.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so write it again. So let's look at your file names.
My what?
Saying, the first one is sayings.txt in your load file. And then find the one where, yeah, one has a S on it and one doesn't. That was my bad. See how up at the top, it doesn't have the S.
Yeah.
So take off the S because we started out without it.
Sure.
That should fix it.
Yeah.
So it's using the same file. Yeah, try it. That should help. Yay.
Thank you.
Good job. Okay. Do you guys remember this one? Yeah, I know. I knew you would love it. Get out your phones. www.quizlet.live and that number. Huh? You can use a computer, but if a bunch of you do, it'll be hard. Huh? I don't have a Kahoot. Nope, nope. You're Quizlet Live, and you're going to get up and move around and talk to each other. Okay, just sit there at your computer yelling at it. Do what? Use the Wi-Fi. You want mine? It's gross, it's dirty, but I'll let you use it. Oh, who is Dr. Ford? I saw it. I'm gonna put it back somewhere. I'm gonna see if I can make it, if I can show this to you.
I don't know. Really?
You're fine, you're fine. Let's keep trying. Keep going. It's fine. It's still there. You can't see the number. Just hang on. Be patient for a minute. I know that's not in your vocabulary, but let's keep going.
No, she.
Let's see. Something. Do I lose some people? I don't want to lose any people. There you go. Doesn't want to work. Gosh, I bet you guys all want to be on Dr. Ford's team or Dr. Farts. That looks like a good person. That would be why those people always walk in here saying, this room smells funny.
So is Tiffany Ford actually is that
Now somebody's assuming her identity.
My name is up there.
Is it her? Ugh, whiners. Oh, we're so close. Okay, I'm going for it. We're missing one. Okay. She's gonna beat you. We ready? All righty. I know you guys would all like this if you didn't have to have a team. Go find your team. If we could have single teams, stand alone.
No, you're not.
I'm the only
What's that say about this group? Okay, we are looking ready. Here we go. All right. Beat people.
We don't even have our whole team together.
Oh, I thought you were ready.
When did I say ready?
I thought you were ready. Hurry.
Everybody, Dr. Parks is here.
Okay. Thank God.
Okay.
Yep, must have been a hard one. I got everybody.
Control variable.
The test.
I don't think this team is fair.
It's the test. It's the test.
No, you just use it one.
Oh no! That was a long drop. I thought they were gonna get knocked out. Okay, here you go. There's a lot of terms in this one. That's one of those days where you feel like as a teacher, the more the wine, the more we'll play.